Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're really diving into a fascinating story. I'm talking about Kim Dotcom,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
the MegaUpload guy.
This is a big one for sure.
It's a wild ride, this one, folks, so buckle up. Okay, so we're looking at this Kim Dotcom podcast excerpt you sent, and it's got me thinking this is more than just file sharing, right? This is about internet freedom back in the Wild West days of online video.
Absolutely. And one man's battle against Hollywood, even governments, really. This is a juicy one.
It really is. Okay, so where do we even start with this? Kim.com, young Kim.com even, not exactly your average kid, or, stealing from his own therapist.
All right, not your typical childhood.
But then at the same time, he's got this insane talent for computers, like way beyond just playing games.
Right, right. Yeah, you see this often, don't you? This almost like a classic story of someone brilliant, but finding these unconventional outlets for it.
Yeah, and maybe not always ethical.
Yeah, exactly. That early fascination with technology that shines through, but mixed with his boldness that really defines his career.
And talk about bold. 15 years old, this guy hacks into German phone systems.
No way.
Yeah. Sets up this call center, but not just any call center. Okay. This one's in the Caribbean.
Smart.
He's raking in thousands. Was it illegal? Probably, but you got to admire the hustle.
You really do. Is it genius or is it fraud? The line gets blurry with .com, doesn't it?
Totally.
Even later on with Data Protect, right? That's his cybersecurity company he starts. Still, you see that walk the line attitude. He's supposed to be the security expert, but he can't help but show off a little.
Yeah.
All that wealth online, is that the ego coming out, the love of the limelight?
Ooh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, that's going to come back later.
Well, let's talk about MegaUpload. That came from a real problem. Sharing large video files was a nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. Back then, forget it.
The dark ages of the internet.
Yeah. And .com, he capitalized on that. He saw that need in those early days of online video.
And it was brilliant. MegaUpload was so easy to use. It didn't matter if you were a tech genius or my grandma. Everyone could figure it out.
Yeah, that user-friendly design was a game changer. Plus, the business model was smart. They had advertising, but also the premium subscription. So it was accessible, but still bringing in revenue.
Right, and it just exploded in popularity. But here's the thing. It becomes this huge thing. But there's two sides to it. Sharing all sorts of stuff, totally above board. But it also becomes kind of the poster child for online piracy.
Oh, for sure. And that's where things get a little complicated.
Oh.
Because now it's not just about sharing files.
Exactly.
This is about who controls the internet, right? What power does copyright law have, and how far will governments go to enforce it?
And let's not forget, this is all happening when the DMCA is still relatively new.
The Digital Millennium Copyright Act, right?
And people are freaking out about SOPA/PIPA, remember those bills? The one's supposed to crack down on piracy, but everyone was worried it would lead to censorship.
Right. Like the government would just shut down websites they didn't like. And the DMCA was already controversial, right? Some people were saying it gave copyright holders too much power.
Yeah, like a hair trigger on taking down content.
Exactly. And SOPA/PIPA would have been a whole other level. Websites could be held liable for stuff users uploaded, even if they didn't know it was infringing. It was a scary time for the internet. People were worried it would stifle free speech and kill innovation online.
So suddenly, Kim Dotcom, whether he meant to or not, becomes the symbol of the fight against internet censorship. The timing couldn't be more perfect or more dangerous, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
He's not just a tech guy anymore. He's public enemy #1 for Hollywood and a hero to a whole lot of internet users.
And that is where things get really interesting.
Talk about a turning point. January 20th, 2012. I bet that's a date that's burned into Kim Dotcom's memory.
Oh, yeah, I bet. It was like something out of a movie.
Seriously?
Helicopter special forces raiding a New Zealand mansion. Talk about a spectacle.
The raid on Kim Dotcom's estate, that was a huge deal.
It really was a real oh wow moment in internet history.
So was this a justified response, though, to alleged criminal activity, or was this about sending a message, making an example out of .com?
Right, because it's not just about what was on MegaUpload. It's about who they thought .com was becoming.
Exactly. And .com himself wasn't exactly trying to calm the waters, was he? He even claimed that Hollywood was terrified of MegaUpload because it was going to disrupt their entire business model.
Like he wasn't known for being shy and retiring, was he?
Not really. It's like he almost enjoyed poking the bear a little. True. And that's part of what makes this whole thing so fascinating, right? You've got the whole David versus Goliath thing going on, the tech outsider taking on the establishment. But then .com himself, he's this flamboyant, larger-than-life character. He wasn't just fighting back. He was putting on a show while doing it.
Our sources mention this lavish birthday bash he threw at his mansion right before the raid. Talk about bad timing.
Oh, wow.
Celebrities, endless rounds of Call of Duty. The guy definitely enjoyed the limelight, even when it seems like things were getting a little dicey.
It's almost like he couldn't help himself.
Right.
But there's a shift that happens after the raid. He's still defiant, of course. But he also starts talking a lot more about his political views.
Okay, so hold on. I have to ask about that. Because he forms this internet party in New Zealand, right?
He does it. And he aligns himself with people like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. These are big names in the fight for internet freedom and against government surveillance. So was this a genuine change of heart? Like the hacker found his true calling as an activist? Or was it more calculated, like a way to drum up public support while he was fighting extradition?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's what everyone was asking at the time. Was this the real Kim Dotcom, the internet freedom fighter finally emerging? Or was it a brilliant PR move by someone who knew how to play the game?
And you have to admit it worked on some level. He became this global figure, a symbol of the fight against internet censorship and government overreach.
It definitely got people talking.
Yeah.
And it put a spotlight on some important issues, especially those allegations that New Zealand's intelligence agency was spying on .com on behalf of the U.S. government. I mean, talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Wow.
You
So
know-
it wasn't just about copyright infringement anymore.
Right. Suddenly you've got international intrigue, government surveillance, the whole 9 yards.
It sounds like a spy thriller.
It really does.
And at the heart of it all are these huge questions. Who controls the internet? Who governs it? What are the limits of free speech and intellectual property online? I mean, these are questions we're still struggling with today.
Absolutely. And in a world that's becoming even more digital, more interconnected, these issues are only becoming more important.
So we've got .com, the one-time hacker turned internet freedom icon, but he's still caught in this global tug-of-war over the future of the internet. And let's not forget, there's still a very real legal battle going on. 2 of his associates plead guilty, but .com's still fighting extradition. So where does that leave us?
Well, this is where things get really interesting
Hmm.
because those guilty pleas, right, they definitely hurt .com's case, but they're not the whole story.
Right.
The big question, the thing that could make or break the prosecution is intent.
Okay.
Did MegaUpload just make it easy to share copyrighted stuff, which is still bad, right? Or did they actually encourage it? That's what it all hinges on.
So it's not enough to just say, hey, copyrighted stuff ended up on your site. They have to prove that .com and his team basically wanted that to happen.
Exactly. And that's where those incentive programs come in. Remember, MegaUpload used to reward users for uploads that got really popular.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So the prosecution argued that is it, just to get more people using the site, to make more money, even if it meant looking the other way when copyrighted stuff was being uploaded.
Right, right.
A calculated risk.
But .com's defense, they said, no, those incentives were only for legal content. They even said that MegaUpload worked with copyright holders and took down stuff that was infringing when they were told about it.
Sure, and that's a key part of their argument that .com's a scapegoat.
They're saying he's taking the fall for something much bigger.
That the U.S. government is using him as an example because they were pressured by these big Hollywood studios.
And it makes you wonder, right? Because if they can extradite .com, who's next?
It sets a precedent, and it makes people nervous about censorship and how much power governments have over tech companies.
It's a little scary when you think about it.
It is. And, you know, with all this talk about legal stuff and politics,
Yeah.
it's easy to forget that this is about a real person
Right.
with a real life that got turned upside down.
Yeah, no matter what you think of the guy that raided on his home, having his stuff taken away, years of legal battles, that takes a toll.
It reminds you that the internet, it's amazing, but it's not a free-for-all. There are consequences, and those consequences can be really real.
So where do we land on all this? Was Kim Dotcom some kind of digital Robin Hood taking on these old copyright laws, fighting for an internet where everyone's free to share whatever they want?
Right. Or was he a really smart businessman who got a little too clever? Like he pushed the limits of what was legal because he wanted to make a ton of money.
I mean, is it even possible to say for sure?
Probably not. And maybe that's the whole point.
This whole thing, it's about way more than just one guy or one website.
It makes us think about those big questions about technology and the law and freedom in the digital age.
Exactly. Stuff that's only going to become more and more relevant as we spend more and more of our lives online.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder what the internet's going to be like in 10, 20 years.
I know, right?
And what role are we going to play in making it what it becomes?
Wow, those are some big questions to think about.
They are?
I might need a minute to process all this.
Take your time. It was a lot to cover today.
It really was a classic deep dive, but that's why we love them, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're out of time for today, but this was fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us on this crazy trip into the world of Kim Dotcom and the legacy of MegaUpload.
Anytime.
And don't forget to check out the show notes for links and all sorts of extra stuff about the case if you want to go even deeper down the rabbit hole. Until next time, keep exploring, keep those brains engaged, and stay curious, everyone.